what about Mr. Tumnus? Said Lucy. Where is he? Shh, said the beaver. Not here. I must bring you where we can have a real talk, and also dinner. No one except Edmund felt any difficulty about trusting the beaver now, and everyone, including Edmund, was very glad to hear the word dinner. They therefore all hurried along behind their new friend, who led them at a surprisingly quick pace, and always in the thickest parts of the forest for over an hour. Everyone was feeling quite tired and very hungry, when suddenly the trees began to get thinner in front of them, and the ground to fall steeply downhill. A minute later, they came out under the open sky. The sun was still shining, and found themselves looking down on a fine sight. They were standing on the edge of a steep, narrow valley, at the bottom of which ran, at least it would have been running if it hadn't been frozen, a fairly large river. Just below them, a dam had been built across the river, and when they saw it, everyone suddenly remembered that of course, beavers are always making dams, and felt quite sure that Mr. Beaver had made this one. They also noticed that he now had a sort of modest expression on his face, the sort of look people have when you're visiting a garden they've made or reading a story they've written. It was only common politeness when Susan said, "What a lovely dam." And Mr. Beaver didn't say hush this time, but merely a trifle, and it isn't really finished. Above the dam there was what ought to have been a deep pool, but was now, of course, a level floor of dark green ice. And below the dam, much lower down, was more ice, but instead of being smooth, this was all frozen into the foamy and wavy shapes, in which the water had been rushing along at the very moment when the frost came. And out in the middle, partly on top of the dam, was a funny little house shaped like a rather enormous beehive, and from a hole in the roof, smoke was going up, so that when you saw it, especially if you were hungry, you at once thought of cooking and became hungrier than you were before. "Here we are," said Mr. Beaver, "and it looks as if Mrs. Beaver is expecting us. I'll lead the way, but be careful and don't slip." The first thing Lucy noticed as she went in was a burring sound, and the first thing she saw was a kind-looking old she-beaver, sitting in the corner with a thread in her mouth, working busily at her sewing machine, and it was from it that the sound came. She stopped her work and got up as soon as the children came in. "So you've come at last," she said, holding out both her wrinkled old paws. "At last, to think that I should ever live to see this day. The potatoes are on boiling, and the kettle singing, and I dare say, Mr. Beaver, you'll get us some fish." "That I will," said Mr. Beaver, and he went out of the house. Peter went with him, and across the ice of the deep pool to where he had a little hole in the ice, which he kept open every day with his hatchet. They took a pail with them. Mr. Beaver sat down quietly at the edge of the hole. He didn't seem to mind it being so chilly. Looked hard into it, then suddenly shot in his paw, and before you could say Jack Robinson, had whisked out a beautiful trout. Then he did it all over again until he had a fine catch of fish. Meanwhile, the girls were helping Mrs. Beaver to fill the kettle and lay the table and cut the bread and put the plates in the oven to heat and draw a huge jug of beer for Mr. Beaver from a barrel which stood in the corner of the house, and to put on the frying pan and get the dripping hot. Lucy thought the Beavers had a very snug little home, though it was not at all like Mr. Tumnus's cave. There were no books or pictures, and instead of beds there were bunks, like on board a ship, built into the wall. And there were hams and strings of onions hanging from the roof, and against the walls were gum boots and oilskins and hatchets, and pairs of shears and spades and trowels, and things for carrying mortar in, and fishing rods and fishing nets and sacks. And the cloth on the table, though very clean, was very rough. Just as the frying pan was nicely hissing, Peter and Mr. Beaver came in with the fish, which Mr. Beaver had already opened with his knife and cleaned out in the open air. You can think how good the new caught fish smelled while they were frying, and how the hungry children longed for them to be done, and how very much hungrier still they had become before Mr. Beaver said, "Now we're nearly ready." Susan drained the potatoes, and then put them all back in the empty pot to dry on the side of the range while Lucy was helping Mrs. Beaver to dish up the trout, so that in a few minutes everyone was drawing up their stools and preparing to enjoy themselves. There was a jug of creamy milk for the children, Mr. Beaver stuck to beer, and a great big lump of deep yellow butter in the middle of the table, from which everyone took as much as he wanted to go with his potatoes. And all the children thought, and I agree with them, that there's nothing to beat good freshwater fish if you eat it when it has been alive half an hour ago and has come out of the pan half a minute ago. And when they had finished the fish, Mrs. Beaver brought out, unexpectedly, a great and gloriously sticky marmalade roll, steaming hot, and at the same time moved the kettle onto the fire, so that when they had finished the marmalade roll, the tea was made and ready to be poured out. And when each person had got his or her cup of tea, so as to be able to lean against the wall, and gave a long sigh of contentment. "And now," said Mr. Beaver, pushing away his empty beer mug and pulling his cup of tea towards him, "if you'll just wait till I've got my pipe lit and going nicely, why now we can get down to business." Excerpt from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis. The warmth shown to the Pevensey children by Mr. and Mrs. Beaver soon after entering Narnia portrays the personal love that Lewis had for fireside meals with close friends. Beyond this, we see that Lewis's way of introducing the common but virtuous characters of the Beavers is to describe their hospitality in great detail. With minimal dialogue, we as the readers are shown the trustworthiness and goodness of these characters through the way that they treat their guests. The children and the Beavers become close friends almost immediately, and will soon go on through great adventure and trial together. But the original foundation of their companionship is the kindness and generosity that the children receive at the Beavers' dinner table. So many of us today look longingly at scenes like this one and wish for this sort of common warmth and fellowship among trusted friends. But how do we go about making this a reality in our lives? How can we become hosts like Mr. and Mrs. Beaver? How can we become guests like the Pevensey children? In this episode of the Hard Men Podcast, we'll discuss Steve Wilkins' book, Face to Face, and why we believe that hospitality is essential to building the kind of thick culture we're aiming at here in Ogden. All right, guys, welcome back to the Hard Men Podcast. My name is Tate Taylor. I'm here once again with my buddy Ethan Sin. We tried to get Eric to come in with us on this one, but he's just too busy. I don't know if he's just too big of a golfer these days or what.
It takes a lot of time, when you're like the coach, the golf coach, to really go around and give good, helpful instruction to everyone in the office. Like it takes a lot of time.
It does. I've benefited greatly for short periods of time, and then I immediately go back to how terrible I was before. But
there's a lot of people who do this one thing, left hand, strengthen the grip, close your stance a little bit, those kind of little things. Some people can take the advice, apply it. But there's a couple people around here, one in particular, who is like, yeah, I'm doing that. I'm doing all of that. And he's not.
We won't name any names, Ben Garrett, but you know who you are. Before we get rolling here, we're going to talk about some hospitality and some friendship stuff today, and this will relate to several of the episodes that we've done recently on those topics. Building your band of brothers. I think we also did an interview with Pastor Kevin Griffin, not too long ago about hospitality, but it'll definitely touch on some of those things. Hopefully, you get a little bit more practical on some of that stuff. But before we get rolling on that, I just want to say thank you to our Patreon members. We've had some new guys rolling in over there for the Brutal American show. And we really appreciate your support. You guys make this show possible. And so thank you to those guys, as well as all the other sponsors here on the Hard Men Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about Face to Face. This is a book that we actually went through in our Churchman Guild recently. I got to lead the discussion on this, which was a lot of fun. And I felt like it was a really productive conversation. But you've done, have you been through this book more than once?
Yeah, this one has actually been on the Guild curriculum for a couple of years now.
Okay.
And I went through it a couple of years ago for the first time. I'd never read it or heard of it or really read any book on hospitality. A lot of it was kind of things I inherited from my parents or like my wife inherited, but it was excellent. So yeah, Face to Face, and it's Meditations on Friendship and Hospitality by Steve Wilkins. And I don't really know what I was expecting, but it's a quick read, short book, really punchy. But when I got done with it, I immediately gave it to my wife and said, you need to read this. And it's not because she's bad at hospitality. She's great at it. But it was really convicting in a lot of ways, and just giving you a lot more of the why behind the what that you're doing. Like, so I would recommend this book to a bunch of different people who are doing hospitality and really good at it, people who are trying to make friends and make really good friends and build the band of brothers like we've talked about, people who maybe have a lot of shallow friends, want to go deeper. Just all Christians ought to be, I would argue, be reading this book, be familiar with it. I think it's one of those evergreen books that's always relevant and a good reminder of what we ought to be aiming at.
Yeah, we'll get into some of the more detailed stuff that he walks through here in the book, but you came up with the title for this one. I just thought it was really, really good. Why hospitality is key for culture building. And I think this is one of those things that when people come here and visit, if you're personable at all and you're willing to talk to someone on Sunday morning, it's really normal to get invited over for lunch, or, we got this thing going on this evening. Why don't you swing by and join us? And I don't know how many things I've been at, even recently, where we're putting on an event for someone who happens to be coming through because one of their family members lives here. Like Evan put something on for some of his family that came through recently. And my goodness, I think we had it must have been 80 people.
It felt like 2 parishes worth of people there
at one of the congregants' house, grilled a bunch of burgers and hot dogs and that kind of thing and hung out. We had the golf simulator going. I mean, it was a really good time. And at that same event, we had additional visitors who didn't know the other visitors at all, who just happened to get invited because, hey, this is something that we're doing. This is a bunch of refuge people. We're getting together this evening. By all means, swing by and hang out, get to know some of us, ask questions about the community or the church or whatever. And I think that this is one of the keys to the culture here, is a feeling of hospitality and warmth, and just it's inviting.
Yeah.
I think we caught this really early when we came here too. So anyways, go ahead.
No, 100%. I mean, I would argue if you said what's one of the secret sauce ingredients of Ogden and what's going on here, hospitality's got to be up there, and conflict resolution, and they go together. And actually, Steve Wilkins talks about a lot of that in here as well. Because if you're going to have friends, you're going to have true Christian friendship. You're going to have conflict. You're going to have to be able to deal with it. But if I only had to pick one, obviously you can't do that. But hospitality is one of those things we emphasize a ton. The one anothering, the loving one another, bearing one another's burdens, rejoicing with those who rejoice, and weeping with those who weep. And having people in your home and building those deep, meaningful Christian relationships is just one of those keys that I think without which we would not be what we are.
Yeah, I agree for sure. So kind of moving into the book here. In chapter 1, he talks about friendship. Going into this book, I really thought it was going to be a whole lot more on basically what we looked at in the cold open, where it's like inviting families into your home.
Yeah, more on the hosting and hospitality side. But the whole first half or first 3 quarters is friendship.
Is on friendship, and just the basis of how do you operate as a Christian within these relationships that you have with just your friends. And he starts there. What do you think is a little bit different about the way that he approaches this? Because there are some things that jumped out to me that I just had never heard before.
Yeah, I think so. In my experience, and I think a lot of people can relate to this, there are a lot of Christians out there that have been grown up in the church, been members of the church their whole life, but never actually tasted what we're describing and what we're aiming at. They don't have any true Christian friends. And they might have some work friends or people they play golf with, or their kids, they're friends with people kind of because their kids play on the same baseball team together. You have these kind of pseudo relationships, but you really can't truly call them friendships. And I do think until you've tasted that and seen the fruit of it, you don't actually know what you're missing. So he starts chapter 1 with making a biblical argument for why friendship is not this optional cherry on top thing that you can add, take or leave. You can add to the Christian life if you like it, if you like having friends, or if you want. He basically argues that it is a necessity that thou shalt be friendly and be a friend and have true Christian relationships. And he does that in a couple different ways, but basically from creation, the way God created, and also who God is in the Trinity, the fall, and also redemption. He kind of goes through that. So I don't know how much detail you want to get in there, but I just never heard it argued before that this is not an optional thing. This is a mandate.
Yeah, that's super interesting. He makes the point, and he uses a verse that I've always heard connected to marriage. It is not good that man be alone. And so obviously what comes after that is the formation of Eve out of Adam's rib. But he uses that same verse and goes, this also applies to all of the other relationships in your life. This is actually talking about the fact that human beings are just fundamentally communal. Mm-hmm. And we exist in societies for a reason. You're not meant to be isolated. This isn't just hey, every man needs a wife, or every wife needs a husband. It's bigger than that. You need a whole organization of people around you that you're interacting with on a regular basis. And I know that we've talked about the cliche saying of doing life together, but genuinely that's what's happening.
Yeah, no, I think it works. I think that's a true thing. It's been kind of abused over the years to mean something different. But I do think doing life together, and we've talked about this before, the different spheres of who you work with and who you hang out with and who you have hobbies with and who you go to church with and your family. And they, ideally, Joe Rigney talked about this a couple years ago, but ideally that is a Venn diagram that almost entirely overlaps, ideally. And the more you can make it overlap, the better and the easier that this is going to be.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think going back to like looking at God is the Trinity, and the Trinity is a relationship, and the Trinity, and I think you can start there and make an argument for like man's made in God's image, therefore man was made to be in community, just like God is. And then, like you said, with creation and how God created, and then it's actually not good that man's alone. So the idea, he really dispels the idea of this Lone Ranger Christian. Obviously, like we would argue elsewhere that you have to be part of a church, you have to be a member of a church, but even, it's not good for man to be alone. God said that at creation. Then he said it was very good when man was not alone. And so to take that and then try to reverse it and be alone is obviously against God's created order and the good way that he made things. And then he gets into the fall and redemption and essentially like because of sin, man needs friends.
Yeah, it's a survival thing at that point.
Man was not created infinite. He's limited in time and resources and all these things, and so he can't do everything that he's called to do on his own. Certainly can't do the dominion mandate or the be fruitful, multiply kind of thing. You can't do that on your own. And then also when it comes to sin and dealing with sin, sanctification, growing in wisdom, growing in holiness, like. You can look at the world and say like, no, this takes other people to do, and you can't do it on your own. You can't see yourself as clearly as other people can see you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really, really good. I do want to talk about some of the really like practical stuff here, and you have in the notes obligations involved in cultivating true friendships, or like what are some of those things that you have to have in place, and you're actually obligated as a Christian to be doing with your life.
He does a really good job of picking out some different proverbs when it comes to friendliness and friendship and, stranded three chords and not easily broken. And there's dozens of them. But I think ultimately being friendly is a Christian mandate, being friendly to, this is maybe later on, but he talks about the qualifications for elders. Mm-hmm. One of them being hospitable. Like that's a qualification. If you're not hospitable, you are disqualified from being a pastor. And I think it's really important that men don't look at the qualifications in 1 Timothy 3 and in Titus of well, I'm not a pastor, so that doesn't apply to me. But like those are every man should be, even if they're not called to be a pastor, should be aiming for qualification of pastor. And it's only the calling inhibiting that, not the actual qualification.
That's a really good point. I think part of our modern culture of like, we'll just do what's good enough rather than try to excel in every possible manner and category in our lives. This is one of those places where you're like, well, that guy's got more responsibility. He's the pastor, so he's held to a way higher standard than I am. And the deceptiveness of that is that there's some truth in it. And the dangerous part about it is that there is a higher standard for the men who are going to be leading congregations, but it doesn't release the rest of the guys sitting in the pews from aiming at those same qualifications and aiming at being the best Christian man that he could possibly be, which means that everyone should be looking at those qualifications and going, how could I excel in all of these areas?
Yeah, absolutely. I think very practically, two better than one, the examples that you have. So having relationships, having friendships where you can actually follow somebody else's example and be more like them. Everybody can't be your peers. Obviously, if all of your friends are yes men or sycophants that just, never, always tell you that, your poop doesn't stink kind of thing, that's not what we're talking about. But true friendship is one willing to rebuke and correct and admonish and stir up to good works. You're assembling together, you're going to church together. Like that's what we're talking about. We're talking about this corporate body that is taking the sacraments together, breaking bread together. Somebody that you can actually say, the John 15, greater love is somebody who would lay down his life for his brother, my life for yours. And that's what we're actually aiming at here when it comes to friendship.
Yeah, that's really, really good. I also, you had this in the notes as well, but the fact that nothing in your life is neutral, there are no friends that you have that are not affecting you in some good or bad way. Bad company corrupts good morals. And the same thing goes in the other direction. If you have men that are challenging you, that are pushing you to excel, then it's going to be a positive impact on your life. It's going to be noticeable. And I've caught this with myself just since we moved here. The level of awareness and attention that I have to certain things in my life that I wasn't paying attention to at all before we came here is greatly heightened. And it's not because someone came to me and directly said, hey, you've got to really pay attention to XYZ. It's just because the people around me are doing it.
Yeah, it's more of a caught than taught thing.
Exactly. Yeah. And then suddenly I'm going, well, I want to be like those guys. And it's really not even a conscious thing. Mm-hmm. It's just, like you said, sort of caught. And suddenly you start assimilating more and more to the culture here, which is a good thing in my case for sure. Of catching some of these things that I want to be better at, namely hospitality.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think that the important thing to remember when it comes to choosing friends and investing in friendships is that they're not neutral, that you can choose fools and you can become like fools and you can become more foolish. You can choose wise friends and become more wise. And I think in every category, like you're going to have more and less mature. Like I think we have to remember this idea of like hierarchy. Like you might have a friend with somebody who's older than you but less mature, or you might have a friend that's younger but more mature, or it may, especially in these different areas, they might be really good at hospitality or really good at child discipline or really good at family worship or strength training or whatever your thing is, and you can recognize this is my better in this area, and and because of this friendship I'm going to try to go up to that level and get better and become more excellent. And I think there's also a category for Christian friendship where you are obviously the mentor, you are the superior when it comes to a certain facet. And that's fine, but recognizing like the give and take, what you're giving, what you're receiving is going to look different in those different roles. Sometimes, the mentor or the superior is going to be giving a lot more than he's receiving, and that's fine. But there has to be some kind of balance where you are being poured into, but also you are pouring into others. Depending on station in life and everything, like there probably ought to be a healthy balance between that, and they can't all be, superiors, and they can't all be peers, and they can't all be inferiors at the same time.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So he moves from there and kind of talks about the characteristics of a true friend, which is an interesting term. It's strange that we have to like add this truth to the friendship in our day and age, but it does seem like a necessity. Like you mentioned earlier, so many of our relationships are very shallow. There's a veneer over things, and it almost feels like every time you talk to someone, it's like a first impression. It's like, well, hey, how's work? How's the weather? Man, it's so hot out here. Whatever it is,
Catch
like
the game.
Yeah. Did you see the whoever play last night? And but it never really goes beyond that. And it's strange because there's nothing wrong with any of that conversation. It's not like it's inherently sinful or something to talk about the game or the weather or whatever. In fact, good friends do that all the time. That's going to be a part of your friendships. I think the thing that tends to be missing is that there's anything beyond that.
Yeah.
There's nothing beneath it. If you
Right.
try to push any deeper, suddenly it's like you pushed on the wall and figured out there's nothing there but the veneer. Mm-hmm. There's nothing underneath there at all.
Yeah.
And I think this is important. Like, what are the characteristics of a true friend?
Well, I think especially in selecting friendship, and you've talked a lot about this in different places you've lived, but when you push on that veneer and that's all there is, like that should be a self-selection out of that person is likely not going to be a true friend. Like, because there's almost a recoiling when you do look for something deeper, when you do try to push the envelope a little bit and try to build that relationship into something deeper. There's like a recoiling and a shutting down where you can't, and that's a good indication that person's probably not going to be one of your great friends, and that's fine. But recognizing that those people exist and it's very common, in our country today. Like, being ready and having awareness that's a very real possibility.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other thing is, it almost seems silly to have to say it, but like, is Christianity a prerequisite for true friendship? Like, I mean, I think there's tons of people out there that would say no. I have a lot of friends from high school. We've been friends for a long time. But at the end of the day, I don't see how to really fit in this category of characteristics of a true friend, how they can not share your faith, your morals, your standards, what you're aiming at, your vision. What are your thoughts on that? Do they have, like, is it a prerequisite to be Christian to make it in this category?
I think for it to be a true friend, the answer is yes. And the reason for that is that friendships are built on a foundation of conviction. And so it works its way out into the why of everything that you're doing. You might be going to the same job as someone. You might enjoy the same sports teams. You might even have the same hobbies. But if you're not doing any of those things for the same reason as that person, it's going to be really difficult to have them as a true friend. And so in essence, what you're doing is saying we agree on truth all the way down to the bottom. And so then as things start to ascend out of that foundation of truth and work themselves out in our lives, we continue to be aligned. Whereas there are so many people that, like, there is no foundation of truth. They just happen to be on the same trajectory as you. And so it can sort of feel like a true friendship, but like we talked about a minute ago, as soon as you push on that veneer, you find out, oh, we actually don't agree. Like, it looks like we do because we're headed in the same direction, where we both enjoy skiing or whatever.
Yeah.
But like, suddenly when you go, I don't know, as an example, like, look at the beauty of God's creation in these mountains and in the fact that we can just slide down this snow on skis together. And then that person's like, what? And they don't have any idea what you're talking about. Suddenly you realize that even though you're out there together doing the same thing, you're enjoying it in a completely different way. And so it's hard to maintain the connection after that.
I think you can find this in a lot of, like, when you look at political circles, whether it's like neocon or libertarian, where some of the aims might be similar. You might say, like, yeah, we should have less immigration, or like we should end abortion, or we should. But then when you actually get, like, the what might be shared, but the why is going to be very different. And I think that that's fine for a time, but then when push comes to shove, and if there's persecution or pushback, or you actually have to give a defense for the what, then you're going to be on very different pages.
I think another thing here is that in order to be a true friend, you can't just be for this person now in our, temporary fleeting lives. You have to be for this person for eternity. And if you don't agree on eternity, then you can't, that's not an option. It's not even on the table for you to select. And so you have to be for this person's greatest good, not just now, but forever.
Yeah.
Which means you care about the salvation of their souls. You care about the health of their spiritual life. And in order to be a true friend, all of that is necessary. And if you can't agree on those things, then it's going to be really difficult to continue on that same trajectory, because we're Pilgrim's Progress. Like, we are Christian on the road to glory, and it's going to be hard for you to walk alongside someone who isn't going the same place.
Yeah, that's a great analogy, because if you, in that story, how many true friends does he actually have? Like, he meets hundreds of characters.
Yeah.
But you have faithful, right? And you have, evangelist, and maybe one other. Is there?
There's hopeful,
faithful, and maybe those are the only ones you can actually call true friends. And I think it's a helpful analogy, because you will rub shoulders with a lot of different people and have a lot of different relationships, but those true friends are few and far between, because of the shared foundation. He's one of the things Wilkins says is this true friend is an enemy to your sin as well as his own. Right, which assumes you share the same moral code. You're trying to apply God's law to your life, and you're going to do it to the best of your ability in your own life and in your friend's life. And you kind of have that shared agreement that, like, yeah, this is, like, I think the Band of Brothers book called it like a free fire zone, but like this would be that applied, where if there's sin in my life, you're cleared hot to engage with that and deal with it, and I'm going to be receptive to it, and vice versa.
Right. Yeah. I think that's one of those, like a good test is could you say to this person that you think of as a true friend, we can't sin this way?
Yeah.
And that person go, oh yeah, you're right. That's a good point. Or at least be able to like have a decent discussion around that. If someone's gonna look at you like you just grew a second head when you say something like we can't sin in this way any longer, well, it's not a true friend.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So in that chapter 2, he goes through how to find good friends, and I think that's helpful. But again, we kind of come back to like these guys are in the church; they're in your church. You guys are covenanted together. You've taken vows to the same church. You've submitted to the same authority in the church. You agree on all these things. Like that's going to be the first place to look. Because it meets some of those prereqs that you need to have a good friend. So I think it was helpful because every church is a little bit different. We're less programmatic here when it comes to, we don't have a bunch of, youth groups and choir practice and, all these small groups and things like that. But even without all the programmatic stuff, there still exists plenty of opportunity. And I would argue in any church opportunity, whether it's get to church early and talk to people, stay after church and don't be the first one out the door. Don't sit in the balcony and just duck out as soon as the last amen is said. Psalm sing is a great thing that we have here to, just plain fellowship time. There's really no agenda for the first half. We're just sharing a meal. And then all the other organic stuff I think is also really important when it comes to this. But basically he argues like, don't despise or take for granted the opportunities that you do have to find these people.
Yeah. I think this is a good chance to bring up the fact that all of this takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
And willingness to put forth effort. And so, for instance, I was in the middle of working on something for this show actually last night, and my wife had a knitting project she was working on. Ray Buckner's wife had helped her previously and kind of got her into it, and then she like ran into this issue, and so she texts his wife, and she was like, well, why don't you guys just come over for cookies and like I'll help you. And it's like later in the evening, and I think the instinct is always to just be like, oh, well, that means we're gonna get home late, and I don't want to have to do that, and it's gonna take a bunch of effort and energy, and like, but we ended up going, and I was really thankful that we did.
Yeah.
I stayed up a little bit later working on something to get it done, before a deadline, but it was great fellowship. Our kids had a great time together, and obviously my wife is now closer to his wife because of this. I'm closer to him. He was showing me some of his music stuff. It was a great time, but it was one of those things that very easily just could have been like, that's going to take a bunch of effort and I don't want to be tired.
I'm too tired.
I don't want to put in the work to do that. And so much of this is just being willing to put forth the effort that is necessary to build things that are worth building. Like if you're going to build the kind of relationship that you could call a true friendship, it's not going to be easy, most likely.
Yeah. Yeah. And having a county sheriff that you can call is always a great deputy sheriff is always a great thing.
That's a great point.
But yeah, I think it's important to be able to count the cost and be able to put yourself out of your comfort zone. And one of the things I thought about through this is everybody has a different disposition. Some people are more outgoing, whether it's kind of that extrovert that gets gassed up by going and doing things and being around other people. Some people are more introverted. But I think that based on the argument that this is a Christian mandate and you shall be friendly, you shall be a friend, and you shall be hospitable. That's something where it's not an excuse based on I'm an introvert and I don't feel like it. Like it's really one of those muscles you have to exercise and say, I know I don't feel getting up and working out in the morning. Very few people get jazzed up and say, I can't wait to get out of bed. Like everybody, maybe it's just me, rather hit the snooze, rather not do it. But like, it's one of those things, the more you do it, the easier it is. And just like calling people out of that comfort zone of I'd rather be home by myself with my wife, watching a movie, making popcorn instead of going to someone's house or having someone over. And I think it just takes that extra little bit of effort. But once you do it and you taste the fruit of it, you're like, this is great.
It's really good. And you're jokingly saying like it's great to have a county sheriff that's a buddy of yours. but genuinely, people are useful. Like, people really are an asset to your life. There are so many things that you've helped me out with that, like, okay, I want to build this gun. What should I do? Then you pull out a bunch of different options that you already own, and are like, well, try this stuff out, see what you like. We'll put together a list, and then we'll help start trying to find these things, right? Like, that's just one example, but genuinely, people do have different skill sets, and it's really useful. It's a benefit to your life to have good friends who are good at different things than you are.
Yeah, it's a huge blessing, and don't misunderstand. It's not a utilitarian
No.
kind of relationship where it's like I'm using this person for this thing because they're, it's not like that. But I do think it is important to think about social capital. I don't know if you've thought through this, but sometimes what I think about is like before I'm going to make a withdrawal from a relationship, that maybe it's an example like that, or maybe I need to call Ray because we have some homeless people doing weird stuff outside my house, or whatever. Before I do that, I do kind of count the cost and like, have I adequately poured into this relationship? Have I given more than I've taken? Like, or am I constantly like asking for favors? Hey, can I borrow the chainsaw? Hey, can I borrow the lawnmower? Hey, can I get some help moving? Just counting that cost and really making an assessment of like, if I continue to withdraw from this account, how long until it's empty?
Yeah.
If it's not already empty.
It's a great question. And this is one of those things that's really necessary to friendship, is to not always be the recipient. Like, you have to provide value in some way. Otherwise, it's just hard to be your friend, right? Like, one example is as little as like, are you the person that always is complaining? And like, every time you see this person, they're always tired and they always have something at work and they're always just bothered and down and like, they're just worn out, and they're always the person that you're like, man, I'm ready for this conversation to be over. Not because I don't like this person, but because it's just draining on me.
Yeah.
And that's a really basic example, but like, you have to genuinely, like you said, like, you have to invest if you want to be able to get something back out. And a good rule is like, before you ask, see how much you can put in that bucket before you go to make a withdrawal.
Yeah. And even some of these things that are necessary, like we have people moving in all the time. They need help unloading moving trucks. Like, it's really easy. You don't necessarily think about hospitality because you're asking for something, but providing the pizza and the beer and saying thank you, and then being the first one to say, yeah, I'll be there the next time it happens, even if it's not the same account. I think all those things go a long way as far as reputation goes, and being known as a guy who's giving and not always on the receiving end.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good point.
One of the things, I think you asked this question during the guild meeting when we went through this book, but when it comes to friendship, loyalty or competence, if you had to pick one, would you rather have a deeply loyal friend, who's going to go to Mordor with you, or a competent friend?
And we've discussed this obviously before, but you're picking.
Have we done it here?
I don't know. Maybe.
Okay.
It's possible. I don't know. We talk all the time, so it's a good chance we've already discussed this on the podcast, but I'm picking loyalty every time. And I have buddies that are like this, that like, we live thousands of miles from each other now, but genuinely, if I called that guy and was like, I just bought you a plane ticket, I need you to be here tomorrow, he's dropping everything to try to get here because he's genuinely just that kind of a person. Like, he's that loyal, and there's not like a dollar amount value that you can put on that. And we're not saying here that competency is not valuable.
Important. Yeah, super important.
Super important.
Obviously.
I think we did talk about this because we talked about Doc Holliday being really high on both of these things. Like, he's extremely loyal to Wyatt Earp, but he's also extremely competent. And like, yeah, if you could find a Wyatt Earp kind of friend, or a Doc Holliday kind of friend, then that would be great. But like, there's just not that many guys walking around that are Doc Holliday, right?
But I think the point is the emphasis on loyalty, both in cultivating it and looking for it in other men, and then being a loyal friend yourself.
Right. Yeah. Loyalty is definitely the thing that I'm picking. Here's the other thing is like, I think loyalty is way harder to improve on than competency is. I think competency is something that can be improved drastically with some effort and work and time. Whereas loyalty is one of those character traits that's like, if someone's just not loyal, it's hard to go, oh, I'm just going to try to help this person be more loyal.
Yeah.
Well, you're being hurt in the process of that.
Right.
Whereas like competency can be improved upon.
Yeah, absolutely. Next chapter, cultivating friendships. He goes through justice and mercy. And some of the thoughts I had on this chapter were obviously like dealing justly with your friends, with your relationships, with the people in your church. You know, you can think about the golden rule and acting the way that you want to be treated. But I think, and maybe this is kind of my little pet peeve or whatever, but I have noticed, I don't know if you agree, some of the later generations, maybe it started Gen X ish to millennials to Zoomers, but there's some of the basic common courtesy that I think has been lost. And what I mean is things, because all this takes work and it takes effort and takes scheduling and coordination and communication, like all those things are necessities in order to do anything together. But then when it comes to like things like punctuality, like if dinner's at 5, you show up at 5 or, 5 minutes after. If, if you can't make it, you don't just say, oh, hey, I know we had this plan, but like, sorry, I'm not going to be there. Like, giving an excuse, like a valid excuse, so it doesn't come across like I just didn't feel like it.
I'm just blowing you off.
Yeah. Even the RSVP thing, how many weddings have you been, helped plan or been a part of where like people just don't RSVP? Like, they're like Meredith have you gotten to that episode? She's like, I'll just text you the day of, get the details, and I'll have the ribs or what, whatever. Yeah. Like that's kind of like, essentially what a lot of our culture has devolved into. And so I just think those basic things, maybe you weren't raised that way or taught those things, but I think they're really important and they kind of tie into like your yes being yes, your no being no. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's definitely true. I think part of this is connected to entitlement. And when someone offers to have you over for dinner, suddenly you go, well, I'm owed that now. So it's my option to just decline it at the last second. And that's not what's going on.
Yeah.
Someone is extending a service and a kindness to you, and you actually owe them something in response. Mm-hmm. You owe them the courtesy of showing up and being a good guest. Or, you say this to the boys all the time with the Titus 2 kids, is like, if you're going to deviate, communicate.
I'd probably say that once a week.
It's constant.
Forms 3 and 4 boy, yeah.
And like if you're going to do something other than what was planned, let everyone know as soon as you possibly can.
Yeah, whoever is affected by your deviation, you need to communicate that deviation to them. We have standards, we have expectations, and then there are times where you need to deviate, right? But if you're not communicating that, then how do you know if you're on the road, if you're on the path, or if you've been way off for some time and you're just way out in the middle of nowhere? Right. How do you know unless you're communicating that and acknowledging the deviation? So
yeah, I think it's definitely connected to that sort of like maybe you've kind of alluded to this with talking about the generations that have this habit, but I think it's definitely connected to a sense of entitlement to things. And it basically, what it really is just not having a thankful heart towards the good gifts that are being given to you.
And some of it can come with time when you if you move to a place and you're like, I don't have any friends, but the pastors say, okay, well, be a friend, invite somebody over for dinner, do these things. And then it gets reciprocated, but then you've actually tasted a little bit more of like, oh, it actually costs me some money to plan for a bigger meal or time to have a dinner ready at a certain time for these people, for the friends coming over. And like, once you get more into that and those muscles kind of get exercised a little bit, then before you just drop on somebody, hey, I'm not coming out of the blue 10 minutes before you're supposed to be there, you think twice about that because you're like, no, it actually, I know the work involved and I know the effort being put in to host me and my family. And I wouldn't want somebody to do that to me, so I'm not going to do it to them.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point. The more you actually practice this skill, the better the skill of hospitality, the better you get at being a guest as well.
One of the other things I thought of in chapter 3 was just looking for opportunities to celebrate with your friends. And what I mean is, I think the ladies tend to do a really good job of having baby showers or bridal showers or things like that, and there are more normal occasions, but I think for guys, we actually have to look for those and then rejoice with those who rejoice. So some things we've done recently are somebody gets a promotion at work, and it's like a big deal, and it was hard earned. Having a party and celebrating that and getting a gift and things like that. You guys did this for me when I got ordained. Gave me a double barrel shotgun. Like, wasn't at all expecting that, but just like looking for occasions where, no, this is a milestone. This is a big deal. Maybe it's couple years, retirement or promotions or things like that. And I think Saturday, one of our friends is basically separating from the Air Force, starting a new job, and we're gonna celebrate that. It doesn't have to be like extravagant, but we're gonna get some families together, have a nice meal, celebrate. Like, no, you good job, you finished that race. Time to start another one, and just kind of recognizing those things. And I think we can do a better job of looking for those opportunities and making them great, fellowship opportunities.
If this is something that's somewhat foreign to you as well, like you haven't been a part of a culture that does this, you don't realize how enjoyable it is to show people honor that you really like and enjoy and are worthy of that honor. And so it gets to the point where you're like, who are we celebrating next? And you're not thinking of yourself.
Yeah.
You're like, all right, what's the next thing that we're going to do this for? Because I genuinely enjoy seeing glory heaped on my friends.
Yeah.
And it's enjoyable to be a part of that process.
And it's contagious. Like, I can tell you, it may not seem like a big thing, but like the fact that you and the other guys got together, made this plan to give me a shotgun, like that. I mean, I think I've said it to everybody, but like one of the nicest, like most thoughtful things I've ever received. And it's just like, it's one of those things where it's very, I don't know, as adults, you don't have these milestones and graduate high school and graduate college and, valedictorian and do, nobody really cares anymore. And so, but it's so meaningful to the recipient, and then they just want to go and like reciprocate it to somebody else.
Yeah, that's a really good point. There are people that are particularly good at this. They're just gifted at it. My wife is one of these people that's just, it's almost like she has this file book in the back of her brain, and she's just constantly collecting things in there that she's heard people say that they would like. And so she's buying next year's like birthday present months in advance because she's just that way. And I'm not naturally like this, but us having been married almost 8 years, like I'm slowly starting to catch some of it. And there are other men in the community here, which I think for guys is much more effective. Like, our buddy Nick is this way, where he's very, very good,
excellent at that, yeah.
at giving gifts and figuring it out, organizing it, and then, pooling money so that we can get something that's really, really nice that someone would really, really enjoy. But we're not, it's not just him buying, a really, really expensive gift. He's sort of using the community to be able to present these things to people who deserve them, in our opinion. And it's great to have people like that around who are genuinely your friends, because then you can learn from them. That can rub off on you. And then you get better at these things that are actually really valuable talents and things that we're commanded to do. Mm-hmm. Like generosity and showing kindness is something that we're commanded as Christians to do. And it actually takes a skill. It's a practice. It's not just like this general, I don't know, like heart position kind of a thing.
No, it definitely takes practice, because by default, we are pretty self-centered. We're pretty selfish. We think it's a zero-sum game where if I spend this money on my friend, then I'm not spending on me or my family or my kids or whatever. If I buy you a gun, that means that's one less gun I buy myself. Like, that's most people's kind of disposition. But he argues that the loneliest people are the most selfish people. And so as we're cultivating this friendliness and this friendship, it does take killing selfishness and killing pride and like cultivating humility. And that attracts people. People want to be around you. People want to be your friend when that's the disposition of your heart. And I think that's just super important. The reciprocation of hospitality. It's not always like, okay, another office analogy is when Andy and Dwight are like trying to outdo each other, and like, you owe me a favor and you owe me a favor. And it's not that necessarily, but it should be a thought of like, you had me over for dinner. When can I have you over for dinner? Mm-hmm. Not to like even the score, but like that's the way it works, is like, if you bring over a plate of brownies, I'm not sending the plate back empty. Like my wife's going to make some cookies and send it back, or just thinking about how to outdo one another and showing honor is kind of the attitude rather than like do I owe anybody anything?
Quick side note, as like the resident fitness guy, like you got to be careful with some of this stuff because your wife will make everyone fat. Like it's dangerous when you have rules where like, hey, if you make us dessert, we're making you dessert. Like genuinely, you have to be careful. Our wives are really good at making tasty stuff, and it's a test in discipline.
Yeah, this is a self-control test. Absolutely. Chapter 4, moving on, cultivating friendships, love, and good works. And I think on this one especially, just in the cultivation of friendships, your life has to be disciplined enough to have time for friendships. You whether it's your calendar has white space for it, or you've poured the time into disciplining your kids, or organizing your home and making it a hospitable place. Like your life actually has to have a certain amount of order to it. That's almost a prerequisite. So, because obviously, like the rightly ordered loves, you have, you're gonna have your wife and your kids, and friendship is gonna come after that. But if all your time is spent on your wife and your kids, because it's not going well, you're not going to have time to cultivate good friendships. So it really puts the burden on you to get your life in order, to get your marriage in order, to get your kids, well disciplined, and even just in the acts of going to someone's house, if your kids are a mess and undisciplined and they can't sit through a dinner, you're going to hopefully be embarrassed for that. So you can spend the regular family dinners 6 nights out of the week practicing table manners and chewing with your mouth shut and not excusing yourself from the table and finishing your meal and clearing your plate and all that kind of stuff that should be, pretty basic stuff. But, you definitely don't want to bring that into somebody else's home or have somebody come over when it's kind of a mess.
Would you say that this is one of the biggest obstacles people face to not just being like hosting people and displaying hospitality that way, but also just being guests in other people's homes is child discipline?
I think it's up there. I would argue it doesn't have to be just that thing, but what it does is it does expose some of those faults, some of those vices that need some work. Because if you just see people out in public and you see them at the grocery store, you see them at church, some of that stuff can kind of get painted over and it doesn't always come out. But if you're in someone's home, it's kind of like, the kimono's open here, and like you're gonna see behind the paywall a little bit and see what's actually going on. And so I think it is one of those things where you can kind of like put on a good face, but out in public. But then when you bring somebody into your home, they're seeing everything. They're seeing, is the home clean? Is it organized? How do they really? I mean, they're online. They're really food fussy, and they say they eat really wholesome stuff. But looks like we're having to pizza rolls again, whatever. But it definitely removes some of that facade, and I think that exposure, one, is what we're aiming at, for the true friendship. But it also probably prevents people from wanting to let people in.
Yeah.
He goes through a kind of word study on how we should be given to hospitality in the book. And I thought that was really interesting. How
it's from Romans, right?
Yeah. Basically I think the same word is like how Paul like pursued and persecuted the Christians. It's like the same word, and how we are to persecute hospitality is like, it's not something that kind of just happens, but it's something you engage with zealously. So as zealous as Paul was before his conversion to kill Christians, that's how zealous you should be for hospitality. That's kind of what he's getting at, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's just really helpful to think through. Is this something I'm just going to, hopefully it happens. Hopefully one day somebody invites me over, or is this something I'm zealously pursuing in my life in ways beyond just like letting it happen to me?
Yeah. The very, very aggressive stance towards pursuing like a communal life with your people, with your friends, is something I had never heard brought out of scripture before. So this is super interesting, him talking about how to like basically persecute or aggressively pursue hospitality. And I think there's some good examples of that here. We had a members meeting Sunday, and it's hilarious because all the buddies, like immediately when the members meeting's over, they sort of congregate, and you can tell everyone's just trying to wait and find out who's gonna say where we're going next. Like, all right, so are we going to hang out, or
We going to your house? Yeah.
whose house are we going
We
to?
firing up the golf simulator?
Yeah, exactly. That's always the thing. But like, we are, like once you get momentum moving in this direction, it's really easy to keep it going. But starting that, like taking the first steps, can be really difficult. But we sort of have some momentum moving now, and now you have these moments where, like, as soon as there's a pause in the conversation, especially towards the end of functions, like we're wrapping up golf or we're ending a members meeting or whatever it is, like suddenly everyone's starting to formulate where we're going to go next.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I also, I don't know how much he gets into this, but if we look at the world, a lot of the friendships, even the surface ones, are formed by things like, are my kids on the same sports team, or do our wives, do something together or whatever. But really what we're aiming at here is the men having kind of leading the charge with that. And I think it kind of, what I've found is when you have men with well-ordered homes, who love their wives and discipline their children and have a good Christian home, and the men become friends, what tends to happen is the wives follow and the kids follow and things like that. And so I do think prioritizing male friendship and we've talked about this before, but having male only spaces and having the opportunity for men to form those bonds, whether it's playing golf or going shooting or working out together or whatever, and having time where men can do that without excuse and not like have to pay the price when they get back. Because a lot of things that follow are like, let's go to the gym together on Saturday and then let's go cook out at your house. And then everybody comes over and the kids are there and they're playing in the pool and the wives get together and hang out. And I think that those tend to follow those other secondary, tertiary relationships follow in a really positive way, rather than letting the ladies or the kids lead the charge on that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because this is the way that culture begins to be shared and translated between, especially in a place like this where everyone is, for the most part, from somewhere else. Like, none of us are locals. Very few of the people in the church grew up in Ogden. There's a handful, but most of us moved from somewhere else. And so you have all of these different background cultures that are being brought with you. And I've seen this with our wives where suddenly my wife is making some brand new thing that I've never seen before, but I'm like, this is really good. Where'd you get this? And she's like, well, I got it from Paige. And, us getting to bring one of my favorite things that we've done here was my wife over the Christmas break learned how to make my grandmother's chicken and dumplings that are homemade, and it's really well done. And she learned how to make them. And then we got to bring those to your house for a meal with a group of families. And I was like, this is so cool to get to see what I think of very much as like, this is nostalgic and like, this is my culture, but we're getting to share it. And the cool thing is that it doesn't stop there. Then all of the wives go, hey, these are really good. How do you make these? Like, Can I have the recipe? And we have 4 or 5 different families in the church that are making my grandmother's chicken and dumplings, because we're sharing culture with each other. And it's not just in one direction. It's back and forth across families and across family units. And I think that's one of the ways that we build this really thick culture through hospitality, is by being able to share these things with each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Chapter 5, he talks about destroying friendships, or like what to avoid to prevent destroying friendships. And I think a lot of this is common sense, but as you are building these deep, true Christian friendships, there are going to be temptations to have a loose tongue, to slander, to gossip. And like knowing what those are, knowing, properly defining them biblically, like gossip could be a true thing, but I'm telling somebody who doesn't need to know, or this was shared in confidence. Now I'm telling somebody else who it wasn't shared in confidence with. Just being able to call it what it is, and avoid it, I think, is one of the things that's going to kill friendships the quickest. Flattery and being a flatterer or flattery is something to avoid. Whether it's, there's a difference between gassing up your friend and rejoicing in something they're excellent at, and being a flatterer, right? And I think the difference when you see it, but having a bunch of sycophants around you that flatter you, like there's tons of proverbs about that. That's not what we're looking for. Forbearance and charity is super important. we talked about before, like the foundation, the Christian foundation, and I would even argue some of those tier two issues in your church, but giving people the benefit of the doubt, thinking the best, some of the way that Paul describes love and believing all things and bearing all things, I think is super important. Not as soon as I have, something happens and I could think, oh, he did that because he's just an a-hole and just did that to spite me. Or you could think like, oh, it was probably an honest mistake and it probably didn't even think about it, and just thinking charitably towards other people. Triage of important issues. So we're going to have the foundation we have, but we're not going to agree on every single thing down to the bottom. We're going to have those Christian liberty issues, like one wife head covers and one doesn't, and we're not going to die on that hill, and we're not going to like break fellowship over some of those debatable Christian liberty issues. And I think that like, having those categories and being willing to tolerate when people are tolerance as a Christian virtue, not in the way that we talk about today, but I think that's going to be really important in maintaining those bonds of unity.
I think there's a similarity here between the loose tongue slander, gossip stuff, and the triage of important issues, where it's important for the person who has the tendency to bring these things up, but it's also important for the person who is the recipient of these things to be able to shut them down or avoid them if needed. Like if someone's going to start, maybe it's not slander or gossip, but you just happen to be there for the conversation with two guys that are discussing something that's none of your business. And the ability to like not ask further questions and not insert yourself in the middle of things that are that is not a responsibility of yours, doesn't have anything to do with you.
Yeah.
And it's probably information that you don't need to be privy to.
Yeah. Or even excusing yourself from a conversation. You're like, this is not my business.
Yeah. And being able to do that, obviously on the front side of that, like not bringing those things up in the wrong situations is really important too. But this is also true of like that triage of important issues and like agreeing to disagree. Just because someone's really passionate about whatever subject and they tend to bring it up and have a really strong stance on it, doesn't mean that you constantly have to jump in with them and resist them on it. You can just sort of let it go. And
yeah, absolutely.
Pass on by it.
The other one on this with the kind of gossip slander, and it happens in male circles. I think categorically it happens more in female circles, but having the thick culture where a new lady comes into the church and wants to kind of start to engage in some of this gossip and slander kind of thing, having the backbone, or the wives having the backbone to shut it down and say that we don't do that here. Would your husband feel honored if he heard you talking about this, talking about him, in this ladies book group or whatever, but just like giving the wives basically the commission to be able to shut that kind of stuff down, because it doesn't take much. You get shut down for that one time, and you recognize this is not a safe place for me to gossip, and you either repent of it or you try to find somewhere else, but it doesn't tend to linger when you treat it that way.
I was just talking to Eric about this the other day when we were golfing, and his wife's tendency to immediately shut those things down and how good she is at that. And I think if you're in this, you happen to find yourself in this situation, one of the most potent responses that you could give is like, oh goodness, have you talked to the pastors about that?
Yeah.
I'll bring it up to because Jerry's this way. She's like, I'll bring it up to my husband for you.
Yeah.
And like, even if you aren't going to bring it back up, someone's going to contact you about it.
Oh yeah.
Because originally it was like this fun, like sneaky, like just offhand comment kind of a thing that doesn't need to spread from here. But when it's treated like an actual issue, like you brought it up, maybe it is a problem. Mm-hmm. Let's deal with it. Well, then suddenly the tendency to want to bring things like that up goes away, because you know that it's going to actually be dealt with.
Oh yeah.
And so that response of like, oh, have you talked to the pastors about this? Maybe we should bring this up, and like genuinely treating it like a serious issue.
Yeah.
Typically, you self-select pretty quickly and go, okay, that was not something that I actually want to deal with.
Yeah.
I was just trying to get some attention or, get a quick laugh or whatever. And you're quicker to kind of change directions on those things or think twice about bringing them up.
On this, dealing with these sins is just with these friendships, the ability to deal with sin biblically and that comes into the foundation. Like, do we believe what Matthew 18 says about that? Do you have the courage Do you have the ability and the desire to, when your brother sins against you, you go and tell him his sin? Or is that the habit that you're in? Is that a muscle that needs, a little bit of work? But if you're not going to cover it in love, then you're going to have to address it. And so both on the prosecuting side and on the defense side, like that has to be something we are constantly comfortable with, whether it's somebody telling you your sin or you telling somebody else their sin. But seeking, understanding, we're seeking restoration, we're seeking reconciliation, and then us being willing and ready to forgive when the repentance comes, is just such an important tool in this toolbox. Where again, none of this is going to be possible if you can't deal with conflict and sin biblically.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the first part on friendship, right? And then now he moves into hospitality. So 3 more chapters here. Chapter 6, commands of hospitality. And he goes into a lot of detail. We've talked about it to some extent, but certainly pursuing the joyful exercise of hospitality, not letting it be something that you do begrudgingly, or it's kind of like tithing, I think, where God loves a cheerful giver. And if you're going to do it begrudgingly, like you're basically just like hamstringing yourself in, God blesses a cheerful giver. But if I'm going to do it begrudgingly just to check the box, like that's not what we're aiming for. Same with hospitality here. It's out of a fervent love for one another. And I think one of the things is a common trope in churches is the kind of 80-20 rule, where 20% of the people do 80% of the work and kind of 80% are freeloaders. And we obviously want to get away from that, and we want to have, as much as possible, 100% of the people being friendly, being friends, being hospitable. And I think that is something that that you can practice. It's caught more than it's taught, but it certainly can be taught as well. But doing it out of a fervent love for one another and being given to it and pursuing it rather than just like hoping it happens.
Yeah, it's really good.
Chapter 7, nature of hospitality. One of the things he addresses is this common complaint that the world gives toward the church, that churches are unfriendly places. And I think it depends on what you mean by that, because for a lot of years now, a lot of churches have been very seeker sensitive and almost in kind of a very shallow and sometimes trite or fake way, being overly friendly. And like anytime you see somebody you haven't met yet, like you just go over and introduce yourself and like, welcome to our church, we're really happy to have you. And like that can be good as far as it goes, but it kind of tends to stop there, where it's kind of a friendly face, but it's a veneer. Contrast that with, I've gotten emails to Info Refuge and Google reviews where somebody will say, yep, I came into church 2 minutes before the service started, I sat in the balcony, nobody said hi to me. Yeah, I left right after, but nobody introduced themselves. Nobody said hi. There were tons of people having conversations. Obviously, you guys are really good friends, but nobody was friendly to me. And what I found is when you kind of pursue that and ask, you're like, well, did you introduce yourself to anybody? I'm sorry that we are actually really good friends here, and we catching up and I think we do a decent job of noticing strangers and introducing ourselves, but yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it takes two to tango. And if the attitude toward hospitality and friendship, or even just like meeting people at a new church is like, well, I'm going to let it happen. I'm going to let it happen to me. That's the wrong attitude to off the jump.
Yeah. It's really not that difficult. At least speaking from personal experience here, like you can smile, make eye contact with someone, shake their hand and introduce yourself. And that's as much as of a foot in the door as you really need to start to get to know people or get an invite somewhere, or, let's go have lunch, whatever. On the other side of that, for our people, I think it's really important to just have some questions loaded up because of the podcast and because of the media here that comes out, like so many people that come to visit already know a whole lot about what's going on. They've seen Brian Sauvé's music, or they've heard Eric and Dan talk on a podcast or whatever it is. And so they sort of almost feel like a stranger that's walked into a home, I know who you people are, but you don't know who I am.
I know all of your kids' names.
Right. Exactly. And I think for us, like for our community, the ability to kind of like have some questions on deck. Hey, welcome. How'd you hear about us? Where are you from? and just be able to kind of like start a conversation that's about the other person
Yeah.
instead of immediately going into like, welcome to refuge, we have XYZ, and like talking about ourselves the whole time.
I think that's just good principle no matter what, whether it's in church
It's a good point.
or at dinner, somebody comes into your home. Generally speaking, people like being asked questions about themselves. People like talking about themselves. And so getting out of the habit of doing that yourself, but asking, thoughtful questions to the other person. I've been to a lot of families' houses for dinner here, and they some families kind of have these canned questions they ask to everybody. Sometimes they're like, "What's your favorite fiction you've read this year?" Or I think the Griffins ask something like, "What was your favorite thing this week?" Like pretty open ended, but like it really makes you think of like what good happened this week that I that I want to share. But things like that can be really helpful and be a good jumping off point that can lead to better conversations. And I do think when you do that, you have somebody in your home and you're asking them questions and they're telling you about their work and their family and their church history and just like all the normal things we talk about. When you have the opportunity to follow up and you see them at church or you see them at psalm sing or whatever, you think about what's a follow up that I could ask. Oh, how's your grandma doing? Or did that promotion? How'd that work? Like thinking thoughtfully about the other person and checking in on them, I think really goes a long way in making other people comfortable and wanting to get into a better relationship. And I think that's something that we just have to practice.
Yeah, for sure. I think I was going to say the same thing about having been to the Griffins. Like you can tell that they've done this before. They're skilled at it. It's a practice, but it's not something where they are doing this for the very first time and they're trying to come up with stuff on the fly. They've put time and effort into cultivating friendships and starting conversations with people, making people feel that warmth and hospitality and feel as if they're at home is really, really important. You don't want people in your house sort of sitting there like waiting to leave.
Yeah.
Because they're just uncomfortable and they're like, you don't want them to feel like they aren't sure if you still want them there.
Right.
Right. Like I've been places like that where you're like, I think these people are ready for us to leave, but I've like, we've only been here. Like we just finished dinner, like,
yeah.
You don't want to feel that way. Y'all's house is always really, really warm. And we literally have to like go, okay, like their kids are putting pajamas on. We have to leave. Like we can't stay here any longer. But we catch ourselves in that situation all the time because there's just a lot of warmth there. Like you feel very comfortable. You feel at home.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. One of the ones my wife used to, so when we were in pilot training, we'd have student pilots over for dinner all the time. And all these guys want to talk about is like flying stuff because they're spending, 60, 70, 80 hours a week doing it. And that's their entire life. And so it's like eventually the wives kind of got tired of just like talking about, all these different really minute things about pilot training. And so my wife would come up, she had one that was, what sport requires the most amount of athleticism, which is, a grenade.
Yeah.
You can imagine people get really into that based on what they did and everything. But that's definitely one that can start some arguments that can be fiery. But things like that can be really helpful.
Yeah, that's really good. Coming up with thought-provoking questions and being a good conversationalist, even if you're receiving questions, just being able to talk. Like, you don't want someone to ask you one of these questions and then you give them a 3-word answer and then just stop and look at them and like, what's the next question? Like, it's not a quiz. Like, you're not being tested. It's not a quiz.
Interview.
Right? Like, you're trying to get to know people, which means you want them to get to know you as well. So just being a good conversationalist is important as well.
I think chapter 8 goes through the benefits of hospitality, and he goes through what are the benefits to the individual and what are the benefits to the family and what are the benefits to the church. And it's really, really helpful things to think through. But it's going to benefit everybody. Everybody is like, as much as you put into it, you're probably going to, potentially get more out of it. And just overall, if we say we love the church, we love our people, but we don't have tangible evidence to show how we're loving our people. Like how, if somebody said, how did you love, your neighbor this week who's in your church and sits in your pew and your kids are friends and they've already decided that they're, going to get married when they turn 18, in 14 years. How did you tangibly love them this week? And I think that this is one of those ways where you can do the my life for yours thing. You can go out of your way. You can have a warm home. You can cook a meal. You can be a good host. You can make them a drink. Ask them about their days. Ask them about their life. And I just think that practice of generosity and bearing one another's burdens, like, how do you know what the burdens of your friends are unless you do this? Like, where are you gonna, like, maybe the back of the bulletin will say, oh, we need to be praying for this family this week. But how do you get any more detail into what's going on and what the situation is, and how can I be praying for that, and how's it going, if you're not regularly practicing these things?
Yeah, for sure. This just made me think the portion about acting this stuff out is really important. You see this with the cold open, where the Beavers do say to the Pevensey children, they're like, we're so glad that you're here. I can't believe I've lived to see this day. But then it doesn't stop there. She immediately goes to work, like taking care of them and tangibly loving them. She's like, we're going to make you food. He's going to catch some fish. We're going to cook. And we're going to show you our gladness that you're here. And it's not just like if you just brought someone in your house, but it's a wreck and there's not any food, and like all you did was sit there and tell them how glad you were that they're there. It's not actually welcoming.
How believable is it?
Right.
Yeah.
Like, doesn't seem like it.
The thing about that story that I caught this time was they weren't a wait staff. And what I mean is, like, they didn't sit them down and just come over and like bring them hors d'oeuvres and bring them dinner and like wait on them hand and foot. They brought them into their home and they asked them to participate, right? Peter went fishing with the beaver and they're helping him cook and they're helping him drain the potatoes, things like that. And I think that that's great, right? As a guest in someone's home, that ought to be your basically first instinct is, how can I help? Like, I didn't show up empty handed. I brought brownies for dessert, right? We coordinated that ahead of time. What can I bring? Oh, just bring a bottle of wine, bring some brownies, whatever. But then when you show up, can I hold the baby while you drain the potatoes? Hey, can I take the kids outside and play catch till dinner's ready? Like, things that are helpful, like, integrate into the home and be a part of it, and not just like I'm at a fancy restaurant where I'm being waited on.
Yeah, he talks about the difference between hospitality and entertainment. You're not an entertainment company that is in the business of simply showing people a good time. You're actually in the business of cultivating deep relationships. And I think maybe this is like kind of a Southern thing, but I've seen this happen before, and ladies tend to, it's a good intention behind it, but like, say my wife walks in and is like, hey, can I help with anything? And the automatic like default response, even though you can tell like someone's in the middle of preparing all the food, is like, no, I've got it. And, sometimes that's the appropriate response, but I think it can be even more honorable in the right situation to go, actually, yeah, could you help me with XYZ? And it's actually really, you feel welcome when someone's like, yeah, join in on the work, like join in on the project. We're doing this together. It's not just me serving you. We are getting to know one another. This just happens to be the venue that we're in while we do that.
Yeah. My wife used to have a thing. She would call it like the home team. And you could tell if you were on the home team, if you came into the home and you knew where the glasses were and you got yourself a glass and got yourself a glass of water. Like, you knew you were comfortable enough in the home that you were one of the home team. And that's kind of like an example of a test of like, nope, you're just comfortable here. You don't have to ask. You can help yourself. Everything we have is yours. And that, I think that's a good, something like that, where somebody is comfortable enough where they're willing to just be comfortable at your home and help themselves and not feel like, oh, I'm just kind of a stranger here.
Right. Yeah.
So I think we're going to wrap up this episode here with that and talk about chapter 9 in the Brutal American that we'll record here in a minute. But 9 gets really practical and steps toward hospitality. What is, some of these practical encouragements on how to begin it or how to deepen it, how to improve it, how to be excellent with it, and then overcoming some of those barriers that you find. Because I think there are plenty of objections that can be addressed on this is the size of my home, or this is how much money I make, or this is the age of my kids, or like tons of things you could say as why I shouldn't. But I think that's really helpful in practical ways to improve hospitality. So we'll get into that more in the Brutal American episode. Anything else you want to add on the close of this one?
I just know that you guys are really good at this. It's something we've been practicing for a few years now as well. I'm trying to get better at it, but you guys are some of the best we've ever seen as far as a household at being really good at hospitality. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the Patreon episode, because I think this is where you can kind of set yourself apart, is like some of these really practical steps of, you know, things like offering to help clean up after meals are eaten, you know, like helping with dishes or whatever.
Or like your wife, like, is told no, you can't help clean up, and she does it anyway.
Right. Yeah. Like she's notorious for that. She's really good at this.
Yeah.
But she's like, no, we made all these dishes dirty. Like, I'm not going to leave here unless you make me. Like, I'm going to help clean stuff up. But even those really small things like that go a long way.
They do. And they also help just in the overall thing where you have people over and then you're not spending the next 2 days like recovering from the mess and the dishes and everything. But like, if you can leave the house almost as good as you found it when you were a guest, then like it makes it easier on the host. It makes it more, you know, more probable you're going to get invited back.
For sure.
And I think it encourages other people in that caught, not taught kind of way of like, oh, when I'm in your home, I should do this as well, kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that's really good. Hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Thanks for hanging out. As always, like Eric says, stay frosty, fight the good fight, act like men.